It's a world of laughter, a world of tears. Those are the opening words to one of the most recognisable songs in the world. For anyone who has visited a Disney park will have had that tune of It's a Small World stuck in their heads throughout their trip. Now, one of the men behind the song, Richard M Sherman, sadly passed away on the 25th of May 2024. One half of music writing partnership, the Sherman Brothers, Richard has been responsible for a multitude of songs that have filled your mind and refused to leave. Just the mention of them today will annoy you for the rest of the week. Born in New York, 1928, Richard was the younger of the brothers, with Robert being born 3 years earlier. His father, Al, was also a composer who wrote quintessential American pop music of the time. He had been hired to work in California, and the family moved there, taking a long drive together. His mother, incidentally, was an actress working in silent pictures. Richard stated that growing up he adored his brother, claiming that he was his hero. Robert was not as positive, saying that they didn't really know each other. They did put on plays together, charging their friends a cent to watch, and Robert would write whilst Richard would perform, although both admit that Richard may have changed the words and basically did what he wanted. In his early teens, Richard found himself in trouble when he unwisely played about with matches. The incident almost burned down the school, and as a punishment he was sent to join military school. He must have been known as a wild child, as he would also jump from a first-floor balcony of his house, pretending to fly. Being too young, Richard never fought in the Second World War. It was Robert that went to fight. It was during this time that he found himself entangled with barbed wire, that's Robert. As he struggled to break loose, he was shot in the knee, and this led to great suffering and pain, and a fear that he would never walk again. So if you have seen video clips, and there is a clip where they go to collect the Oscar for Mary Poppins, you will see that Robert has a walking stick, and basically this is why. After the war, Richard left high school, but Robert was still ill from his war wound. He would write short stories and send them on to be published, and it was whilst he was in the hospital that he received a call from a magazine, Coronet. His stories would be published over multiple editions, and the editor requested that he provided her the first look at any future stories. The brothers wanted to go to Bard College in New York State and had to declare majors. Whilst Robert initially picked literature, Richard didn't know what to do. He stated that he was in a depression and decided to go for a long walk, and it was whilst walking that he noted he could hear music. Realising that this tune was in his head, he rushed home to play it on the piano. His father heard him and told him he would do a music major. It was during the time at college that Robert's statement of not really knowing each other is actually backed up by Richard. Richard stated that because of the war, they ended up graduating together, but because Robert was a war veteran, the 2 or 3 year age gap felt like 10 years, because Robert had lived so much more than Richard. Richard had a girlfriend whilst at Bard College, and he would spend Christmas with her, leaving Robert behind in the dorms alone. It was with this girlfriend that Richard would marry. He states later in life it was a mistake, but is happy that the wedlock produced his eldest daughter, Linda. Back home, after graduating, it dawned on him that now he had to earn a living. He wanted to be a songwriter and a composer, but his father-in-law wanted Richard to join his dry cleaning business. Richard was daunted by this, as he desperately only wanted to be a concert writer. he made the decision to leave his wife. Richard asked Robert to help get his things out from the marital home, which he obliged. The two brothers then made the decision to move in together, with their parents paying the rent. Richard stated he was happy there because the occupant of the neighbouring flat was deaf, so he could compose his songs and Robert could bash away at his typewriter without disturbing the neighbours. Their father visited one day and encouraged the boys to work together to produce a pop song. They worked hard for months with his encouragement and support until they felt they had completed the challenge. Their dad then pointed them in the direction of Hollywood and Vine, telling them to find a record producer. The song, Gold Can Buy You Anything But Love, was sung by Western singer Gene Autry and released by Columbia. It became a big hit for a while, but Gene Autry recorded a separate song at the same time, and this superseded theirs. Then Richard was drafted into the National Service, but never saw any action. Instead, he worked with the band. Around this time, Robert fell in love and was married soon after. Love would work its way to Richard shortly afterwards, where he met Elizabeth, and the two quickly became a couple. Elizabeth has been known to say that Richard asked her if she would like to listen to his record. She asked him where he bought it, but his reply was that he didn't exactly buy it. This sent thoughts running through her mind, and she considered him a thief and, as he told her he was in life insurance, a liar. She was losing interest, but it turned out to be the Gene Autry record. Shortly after, the two were married. The brothers moved out of their apartment and went their separate ways for a while. Robert worked on songs with various people, mainly Bob Roberts, and set up a music publishing firm. Richard, meanwhile, continued his composing. The two paths crossed again when they and Bob Roberts recorded a song called Tall Paul. Annette Funicello was one of the Disney Musketeers, and she recorded the song. It became a great hit, and the brothers nicknamed her their Lucky Star. They continued to write for a trio for a while, but an argument pursued. Bob Roberts fell out with Richard, and the working relationship ended in slight violence. Robert supported his brother, and Bob Roberts left. Richard and Robert then continued to work together, writing songs for the Sweetheart Doris Day and for Hollywood hunk Tab Hunter. Away from songwriting, their personal lives were flourishing, both in love, both married, and both made fathers. The work with Annette continued, recording around 15 songs together. Then came a call from Jimmy Johnson, the president of Disney Records, which gave them a big break. Disney was going to use Annette in a musical film, and would the brothers like to write the song for her? They agreed, but was told that Disney needed the song right away. As soon as they wrote the song, Richard and Robert arrived at the Disney studios, worried that they would need to pay for parking. Luckily, they didn't, as they only had 35 cents on them. At the studio, Johnson told the brothers Walt Disney wanted to speak to them, and they would play their song for him. Whilst they were in his office, Walt started talking about a picture about two girls who had never met before, but find out they are twins. Confused, Robert explained that they were there to talk about the song for Annette in the film The Horsemasters. Strumming Song, written for The Horsemasters, became the Sherman Brothers' first song for Disney. Walt wasn't that over-enthusiastic about the song, wanting to focus more on The Parent Trap, which the brothers would go on to write for. Their following work was on Mary Poppins. The brothers had looked through the original book and underlined 6 chapters that they felt they could work on musically. It turned out Walt had highlighted those exact same 6 chapters. God, that was difficult to say. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious may be the most everlasting song from the film, but there were also so many contenders. Chim Chimney Cheree won Best Song at the Oscars, whilst Walt's favourite song was Feed the Birds. And Robert even mentioned that it was his son that gave them the inspiration for the song A Spoonful of Sugar. They won Best Score at the same Oscar award ceremony. Whilst making the film, they had to encounter the legendary P.L. Travers, author of Mary Poppins. Now, anyone who has watched Saving Mr. Banks would have a good idea about the issues Walt and Travers had. In the documentary The Boys, Robert described her as a witch. They go on to highlight some of the conversations, and actual audio is played in the documentary where Travers instantly stops Richard from playing to produce a negative comment, mere notes into the opening of the song. On the opposite end of the spectrum, actors Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke had much praise, with Andrews quoting it was the songs that convinced her she could do the film. They also both say that the brothers spent time with them the entire length of making the film. Their relationship with Walt and the Disney Studios peaked in the 1960s. That's the brothers, not Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. They became the only songwriters that Walt had on contract. Assignments followed in productions such as The Sword in the Stone, Zorro, The Gnome-Mobile, and Walt Disney Presents The Wonderful World of Colour. They were both over the moon with the pay, which increased over time, and they revelled in the work and the studio. Over the years, their songs have grown with appreciation. While some call their work kiddies songs, they both responded by they don't make kiddies songs, they make songs for children. They also had their own unique style that included a mashup of words. Most noticeably, I can't even say it, most noticeably, is Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Other examples can be found in their songs for Bedknobs and Broomsticks and The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Richard stated that they called it Shermanized. Richard was known to be more spontaneous in his way of work. He would just grab something and go with it, sometimes playing a tune and shouting a few words. Imagineer Bruce Gordon stated this was true when he was in their office. Robert would periodically stop Richard, they would create a strong song lyric and then move on. Due to this quick way of working, they soon became known as reliable composers who could produce a new song quickly but efficiently. And it wasn't just on screens that their music has charmed fans. In the Disney parks, their songs can be heard in attractions, and they are the Marmite of musical numbers. The first song to be included in the parks was for the Enchanted Tiki Room. The attraction houses guests in rows where they are surrounded by animatronic birds who sing the song repeatedly. For the 1964 World's Fair, Disney was asked to produce an attraction for UNICEF. The theme was called UNICEF Unites the Children of the World. This ride became It's a Small World. Guests board boats that take them through an art and craft world where children of different countries and cultures sing together. The original concept was each area would have its own song. This was still the concept when the Sherman brothers were invited along to watch. They called it awful. The noise of the different songs playing at the same time just didn't work. Walt realised this too and asked them to write one song that would be played throughout the length of the ride. Their talents would also go on to the Carousel of Progress, composing the song There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. Again, the ride takes the same song and plays it repeatedly throughout the guest experience, although there are other songs in the ride also written by the Sherman brothers. Keeping the link with Mary Poppins, the Sherman brothers state that Julie Andrews' husband, Tony Walton, had such enthusiasm for Winnie the Pooh that it rubbed off on them. Walton was born in England and had grown up with Winnie the Pooh, but the brothers were not that keen originally. But then Walton explained why he loved it so much. Along with the other songs in the film, they wrote the famous title song. When the songs for the Jungle Book were all but scrapped, Richard and Robert were called in. Although many of the songs, like Trust in Me and the Elephant March, can be quoted today, it is perhaps I Want to Be Like You that can be sung word perfect and would be best remembered today of the ones that they wrote for the film. Sadly, Walt Disney passed away in 1966. Richard says that Walt, when alive, would ask him to come over to his office and request the sound Feed the Birds. Every Friday, Richard would oblige and play on the piano in Walt's office. And for a while after Walt's death, Richard continued to go up there and play this song every Friday. After Walt's death, the way the studios worked changed. Richard comments that the work started to dry up, and others have speculated that there was a resentment towards the brothers as Walt had taken a keen interest in them rather than others. This was an unfortunate time in the company, and many leave during this period, including Walt's nephew, Roy O. Disney. So the brothers decided that they too would leave. During their time away, they wrote for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, also starring Dick Van Dyke, but returned to Disney to write for Bedknobs and Broomsticks and the Aristocats. They have both gone on record to state that they did not like working there without Walt. They also worked on Hanna-Barbera's Charlotte's Web, starring Debbie Reynolds. Reynolds, incidentally, had previously presented them for the Oscars in Mary Poppins. Richard's passion for his work sometimes created tension with Robert. He was known to have a temper, which actually made Robert think about leaving the partnership. On some occasions, Walt would lash out, but only on inanimate objects, like the piano. Robert wasn't like this. His overall personality was more calm. They would both go on record to state that they argued a lot. The partnership became strained and issues started to arise between the two. Robert was growing weary of being known as part of a quick turnover partnership, often calling Richard Fast and Wrong Dick, Dick being short for Richard, that is. Eventually, whilst finishing the Jungle Book, Robert decided to take a step backwards, away from the studios and away from Richard. The families never met socially, even at the wake of the brothers' parents, and some of their children only met their uncles later on in life. Talking about later in life, they were turned down by Disney in favour of Howard Ashman and Alan Menken for The Little Mermaid. However, they did work on the Tigger movie with Kenny Loggins. Robert moved to London, whilst Richard remained doing what he loved, playing and writing music. Sorry, that sounded wrong. Robert moved to London, whilst Richard remained doing what he loved, playing and writing music. Since his brother's passing, Richard has continued to help Disney continue their tradition of family fun. He helped rework I Want to Be Like You for the live-action remake of The Jungle Book, composing new songs for the film Christopher Robin, and being an advisor on Mary Poppins Returns. Throughout their lives, the Sherman brothers have received many honours. Not only are they Disney legends, they also have a window at the Disney parks, they have their signatures at the Chinese Theatre, and they have their own gold star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. These are just some of the highlights of the brothers' accolades, awards, and achievement. I would need a podcast that's about 6 months long to go into full detail about their complex relationship and all of the work that they did, going in depth of all the songs and their contributions. What would be nice is that every time someone puts on Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, Sword in the Stone, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, or even Winnie the Pooh, we will be reminded of the work that these fantastic brothers did. Later fans could enjoy Christopher Robin and the live action The Jungle Book, not really knowing, but really there should be respect for someone who was there when those films were being originally created. Richard Sherman was one of the last people to be alive whilst working alongside Walt Disney, and unfortunately the number of people in that group are getting less and less. This is the time when Disney thrived. Everything about the company just worked. The park, the animated films, the live actions, and the television show. The Sherman brothers were part of this, and they should be remembered as one of the great contributors to cinema history. Elsewhere, you'll be walking around the park, especially the one at Walt Disney World, and you will hear the tune for It's a Small World. You may walk another direction and there's the Enchanted Tiki Room. Walk in another and you'll hear the song for Winnie the Pooh. You could go about your day watching the parades or fireworks and they've incorporated songs from The Jungle Book or Mary Poppins. You can put on Disney Plus and there's the Tigger movie or the Gnome-mobile or Bedknobs and Broomsticks. In fact, you don't even have to put on a Disney film. Tune into the first Shrek movie and you'll see that there is a spoof of It's a Small World song playing when they reach the kingdom. It's part of our cultural history, not just for America, but pop culture in general. So at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing that I've got to say, and I know that it's going to be said on behalf of both of us, me and Jamie, but I'm sure it's going to be said by millions of people across the world. And that's quite simply, thank you.